From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers. I'm happy to have you here. When it comes to a team of composers reaching into another dimension of alternative music to pull out unique soundtracks playing an often dark human condition, there may not be a more distinctive and prolific team than BENSI and SAUNDER Jurriaans. With musical upbringings ranging from Denmark to Seattle, the two met at the Rhode Island School of Design to begin a career fusing their artistic ambition into scoring. From their dual debut of two Mississippi brothers bearing their mother in 2010's Two Gates of Sleep, BENSI and Jurriaans established their enigmatic, often alternative folk sound the next year with the indie thriller Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. In the dozens of collaborations to follow, it's been impressively hard to pin down these composers' personalities as they've given intoxicatingly offbeat styles to such films as Simon Killer, Enemy, and Last Days in the Desert before making a suspenseful mainstream impression with Jason Bateman's bullying thriller, The Gift. 2 years later, BENSI and Jurriaans would take a lethally rustic trip into the drug woods with Bateman for Ozark, a Netflix show that now reaches its fateful climax. While they've continued to rack up impressive, often hauntingly strange film scores that channel electricity in the current war, examine the riots of LA 92, the attempted deprogramming of a gay youth in Boy Erased, and murderous stays inside the lodge and the rental, the surreal music of BENSI and Jurriaans has become a mainstay of such twisted television shows as American Gods, The Outsider, Nosferatu, Fear the Walking Dead, and Pieces of Her. Now, they reign supreme on streaming, their determinedly personal, existential sound evoking the Yakuza for Tokyo Vice and exploring the dimensional vortexes of Outer Range and the upcoming Night Sky, all while evoking the murderous intentions of the soon-to-be unveiled true crime Staircase. Whether channeling poetic lyricism or the morally twisted roots of the backwoods, it's a musical collaboration that can musically journey anywhere as BENSI and Jurriaans boldly explore the outer realms of scoring. And now here are two composers with some of the most strikingly unique approaches to the dark side of drama. Welcome to Film Music Live, BENSI and SAUNDER Jurriaans.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Well, it's great having you here. So I guess let's start off. Tell us about your own individual musical journeys and what brought you together as composers.
I grew up most of my life in Seattle and started playing guitar at 10 years old, and basically was very into kind of heavy metal, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and all that kind of stuff. And then as I grew older and I started listening to different things, and I got more of an interest in composition, playing with bands and stuff. I went to Rhode Island School of Design in 1998, I think, and that's where I met Danny, who was not at Rhode Island School of Design, but he was living in Boston, and his roommate was my roommate was his best friend from high school. Or middle school, and so he would come down and hang out, and we would play music together. And then I basically dropped out of art school to play music with Danny.
What about you, Danny?
Yeah, I was born in Denmark to an Italian father and an American mother, and moved around from Denmark to England, and then to Germany, and then to Italy. And I started playing the cello when I was in England, also around 8 or 9 years old. And there was always a lot of classical music in the schools I attended. So I started a lot of classical music all the way through high school. And then I came to the United States for college and to continue learning the cello and studying music at Northwestern in Chicago. Once I got done with that, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I realized that the classical music world was too much for me. It was too difficult. So I moved to New York, and actually for Boston for a couple of years, as Saunder said, and then over eventually to New York. And I was all about trying to play the cello in bands. And Saunder and I started our first band, and we learned how to amplify the cello and just tried different things. And really our music sort of career really took off from there. And we bonded heavily over heavy metal music, but also classical music, and then started the band and got that whole thing rolling for many years. And we learned how to really record and play and perform and improvise music. Really, with the band was the strongest, I think. It was like its own intensive university course for over a few years, where we really learned so much. And then that sort of, once the band sort of fizzled out a little bit, one of our friends asked us to score our first movie. And we were like, well, now we know a few things. We'll just give it a shot for free and see what happens. And it started from there. That was over 10 years ago.
Well, I think you guys, for me, have embodied the adage of expect the unexpected. And, right from the start, even from indie films, is that you guys had just this weird, unclassifiable sound, like with every single thing that you did. That for me really came to the fore with The Gift, which is really a pretty remarkable film that Jason Bateman directed.
Actually, yeah. Joel Edgerton directed
it. My apologies, Joel Edgerton. That Jason was in.
Yeah. Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, I mean, the score for The Gift was actually one of our first into like, oh wow, are we in the big time now? Like, what's happening here? What do we have to record a huge orchestra? Like, it was kind of freaky, but it was the first time we're like, well, let's take what we do, which is we don't really have a plan whenever we start a movie, even to this day, and let's try to make a film score that's like even bigger than what we've been working with. And then we're like, does it need to be so big? Why do everything have to be so big all the time? And we just started working on it and found sort of like this voice, and it was our voice, and the temp music for that film was all over the place. So we had nothing to sort of copy. So we just kind of did our own thing. And in doing so, just made sure our little voice or whatever we sound like, made sure that it sounded like that. So it had this sort of visceral human touch to it, which we were always trying to kind of get at. But we're also always trying to make really beautiful music and striking music as well. So there's all these things. And The Gift, was one of our sort of first sort of real big cohesive scores, I would say.
Now, I want to give a big shout out to Lakeshore Records, who were cool enough to give Tokyo Vice soundtracks to the first 5 questions. And I'm going to begin with one from Louis Versinelli. HBO has done more than a few mobster gangster stories, from The Sopranos to Boardwalk Empire to The Wire, which all offer something different. One dark, gritty, the other deep in tradition, and the other where police and crimes committed are violent and shocking. It would seem like Tokyo Vice has taken a little bit from all of them. And as far as the music goes, were any of these used as a template on how to score a TV series like it?
Yeah, it's true. They have done such a cool kind of variation on all this mob gangster stuff. And I think Tokyo Vice, I don't think it took musically. We didn't have any. I don't think there was temp or direction that was given that was referencing any of those shows. I mean, it was more, they wanted to create a sound that kind of kept up with the pace of the show, and so it was very driving and minimal in its own way. But yeah, I don't think it was referencing those things.
Just adding to that, I was just thinking how often, when we receive a film or a TV show, how often a director will be like, I kind of want it to sound like this. Like, this is one of my favorite scores or one of my favorite TV shows. Can you guys do something like that? I think nobody's ever said that to us since we've begun, because nobody wants to pigeonhole. Everybody wants something a little different. So you can get inspirations from certain things, like, oh, I like that soundtrack. A director could say that, I like that other show, but that just means to us, like, okay, what is that sound? Oh, it's really driving electronic stuff. Okay. But we're not like, okay, let's do that then. We'll just be like, okay, that's going to be one of our recipe, like our ingredients, but that's it.
And they'll usually, I lost my train of thought. If they come to us in the first place, it's usually they're not looking for something that they want to copy, really, or create.
They're like, we want to see what you guys are
doing. They want something new, and
then we're like,
they're going to get it anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing that really strikes me about the show, the miniseries, which is just terrific, is that it never really sounds Japanese as such. It avoids those kind of cliches of Japanese Yakuza scoring.
Yeah, we did that very much on purpose. I mean, that was one of the directions also from the showrunner, and what our kind of instinct would have been anyways, is there are actually quite a few, I mean, there are Japanese instruments used in the score. There's a lot of taiko drums, but we usually play them ourselves here in the studio. We bought a koto, this big stringed instrument, and used that quite often, but we used it in ways that you might not hear in Japanese music. We bowed it, we kind of retuned it, all sorts of strange, people who don't really know how to play the instrument, but we're not pretending to play the instrument either. So there were some, but we didn't want it to be pigeonholed as this is Japanese music in Japan. It would have been too on the nose.
And also what sets the show apart, usually these are shows about cops, but essentially even with all the characters it's about a newspaper reporter. What difference does that make to the musical approach?
They made it lighter, didn't it? It made it different, more emotional and lighter and more engaging. I think we started out with a much heavier electronic dark. Remember when we started Saunder? It was like that first episode, we were like, oh, deep dark, like Tokyo mafia, like fighting, and just like, let's get really dark electronic sounds and like get really heavy. And then we're like, oh no, that's not what the show's about. Like,
yeah,
that's the other thing, and we'll probably touch upon this a couple of times as we talk about the various shows and things, is this kind of, we never know what we're going to do, and you kind of have to be okay with that. Like, you have to be okay with, well, maybe it will be a dark electronic score, or maybe it'll be a more emotional, lighthearted score, much more about this character, and comes over from the United States and is learning journalism and learning Japanese, and that's a different journey than mafia and all that kind of. So do you know what I mean? So you have to be open to the score changing possibly, and you might have to come back to the first episode and like redo things. You got to keep things open all the time. Very important.
Yeah, and I think with Jake's character, it was a really interesting and kind of new place to score from this kind of, he's a journalist, he's a bystander watching this stuff happen, and he has these relationships that we're underscoring, with the Yakuza and with the police and with the newspaper, and his disappointments in kind of, the newspaper and what he can report, and those strong emotional connections he has are really, that's where the score comes from.
So now I've got a question from the Mann music Ivan Sorkin. How do you decide who will score this or that scene? And speaking about the noir genre, which noir film and score is your favorite one, and which of them inspires you?
That's like my worst question. Like, I don't have favorites. I don't have favorite films. I don't have favorite bands, and I don't have favorite composers. I mean, that's a favorite. If I was like, I'll put on John Williams in the car and be like, God, he's just so good. But I don't have favorites, and so I don't have favorite like noir composers. I like them all, and I think noir is such a huge genre, really, from anything from like Blade Runner to all the films for the season. Like, I get it, and all that jazz stuff. It's like, but I never was like, I don't have like a list and a favorite. I don't have that personally, so I just want to get that out. What was the first part of the question?
Let's go back to that. It was again, who will decide who scores what scene?
That's part of, I think, what I was saying before. Saunder and I don't sit down and be like, all right, you do that one, I'll do that one. It's more like, who started working first, and what scenes did he? Oh, he's working on that. Oh, let me go see what he did, and then he'll do that to me, and then we'll sort of see who's kind of taking the reins. It's like a natural a natural occurrence, right, Saunder? It's like we
Yeah,
just sort of, one of us kind of just starts kind of taking it, like, and running with it, and the other just supports, or it's the other way around, or sometimes it's a total massive collaboration from the beginning, where we're just like, hey, I wrote the piano, do you want to put the cello on it? Sure. And that's just a sketch, but like, oh, we've come up with a piece of music which works. I love it. Do you love it? Yes. And then we take it from there. But yeah, we don't like assign things like you do that and I'll do that.
Yeah, maybe later in the process in a project, it'll come up with, Danny, I can't handle this cue. You take
you do it.
But we try to keep it really organic. Honestly, we just both kind of, whether maybe we're in the same room for the first, for the germination of the idea, and then, or we're in our own studios and one of us just feels inspired to take over a cue, or even an entire project to start it, and then we pass it back and forth, and sometimes it switches back and forth, numerous times in its lifespan.
It's good though. It helps us get things done a lot faster because you're not sitting on and procrastinating. I don't want to work on this. I don't know what I'm going to do. Yeah. I'll do it tomorrow. I say, oh, I just can't do it. Here, Saunder, you do it. Or the other way around. Like, and then, oh, this is totally my cup of tea. I'm going to do this. This is great.
Now, I think you guys have to be probably the hardest working, most prolific composing duo right now. I don't know if you've like got 20 shows on at the same time, but so this goes to our questions from JM Productions. How would you describe your experience working on Fear the Walking Dead for seasons 4 through 7?
Oh, man, Fear the Walking Dead has been a staple of our career these past years, and it's such a fun show. We came in, season 4, we came in and they changed the whole team behind the show. And we really loved the I forget what his name is, the last composer, but he's brilliant. He also did Halt and Catch Fire, which was a great show. But he was doing a great score, and it was a hard kind of thing to follow up. And it was our first kind of network TV show. I think after Ozark, I don't think we had anything between there. So we were nervous, but we fell right into it, and again, it's one of these stories that's like it has this dark horror aspect, but really it's about the human condition and the connections between the people, and it's been such a great show to work on. The whole team is awesome. We've really developed some big overarching themes that go through the whole show, and it's a smooth, fun process, and couldn't be happier with it.
Hey, now I think of all the stuff you're scoring, there's so much good material, but for me it's been about Ozark, and you could really say that was the one that really, really put you on the television map, just in terms of like a cult television show. What was it like getting that project and just basically determining the sound for it?
Well, we came, actually, it was from The Gift. We went to the premiere of The Gift, and we met Jason Bateman afterwards. We had actually met him before. He had seen a film we did called The One I Love and kind of inquired about us. But so at The Gift premiere, we met him, and we just said hi, blah, blah, blah. And then he was like, guys, I got to talk to you about this project I have. It's a show. You're gonna love it. It's right up your alley. And we're like, okay. And that was kind of it. And then a few months later, he came back to us with the whole pitch of Ozark, and we were on board, of course, right away. And then the initial conversations were, he was so good at communicating what he wanted the show to be and the tone of the show, from the colors to the pacing, and we kind of, we knew in those first conversations, we really had a good idea of what we thought we wanted to do. Again, like Danny said, we'd never really know until we have a picture in front of us. But speaking of that, they would send us, as they started shooting, they would send us dailies. So not even full cuts of scenes or anything, just so we could see what they were shooting and what it looked like, and some dialogue. Here's some dialogue, and it's all fragmented and stuff. But from there, we could really start to preemptively build the palette of the show, drawing on the kind of majesty of nature there, but mixed with this kind of gritty, kind of trashy, I don't know, human kind of motorboats, burned out trucks. So we built the palette of the show quite early, and then again, it was once we got into it, it was a very smooth process. It was really fun.
Say the scoring of the show has changed over the seasons to get to this point.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely one. It's like, you know, like Fear the Walking Dead. It's got these there's bigger themes that kind of start to grow throughout the show, and then there's a lot of new themes that come in and out. You know, for season 3, there was the brothers theme, and you know, these kind of tragic, more emotional stuff that started. And I think as we built a more emotional connection to the characters, the music kind of reflected that. We meaning me and Danny, and I think Jason was more open to that thing as we went along too. And so, you know, we'd expand the sound a little bit here and there, but we kept it in the same world for sure for the whole thing. And then in this last season, there's some real big moments kind of blossom out. So,
well, I mean, you know, I'm sorry. For me, the character that really, you know, changed the most and became, I think, the fan favorite was Ruth, who, spoiler alert, you know, I just, almost hard to accept her end with this. I mean, how was it? And she really kind of was the biggest character in the final episodes.
Yeah.
Tell me, what was it like, Danny? What was it like following her character arc?
Well, I personally loved her since the beginning. I was always like, I was always totally taken by her performances and like just her characters. I thought it was just so good. She was one aspect. I don't know if I can speak too much to like her themes and stuff like right now, but like I just feel like some of the like her and Jason's character, there's this like tongue-in-cheek kind of, we're very serious with this score, but like if you'll notice in some of the percussion, the percussion that we do, it'll always be these childish rhythms that call and respond to each other. Very, very simple and mundane, like boop 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 boop, and it's like, why is and it has this kind of call and response childishness that actually is kind of built into the whole score all the way through. And whenever we do that, a lot of the percussion, you'll hear it. And I just think that plays into the sum of all the characters and what they're all doing there. So we always try to look at things in that way, in more global things, not specific melodies necessarily, but what the sort of, how you compose, where you compose the melody from. Like Saunder was saying, the majesty of the nature. Okay. The motorboats and beer bottles and white trash sort of stuff. Okay. Got it. Okay. And then what are they all doing there? And what's the story? And those are sort of our things. And now how are we going to sort of correlate all these things? And is it a whimsical thing? Is it all just super serious and dark and terrible? Not necessarily. There's all these family interactions and things. So how do we get all those sounds? And so, as Saunder would say, we build the palette, which is the percussion, and then these like warped and distorted, crumbly electronic sounds, but also organic sounds. A lot of stuff just done on the strings, one string at a time. Cello, viola, pizzicatos, very closely mic'd, and then you get this sort of visceral, like. And it's all you need. And how little can we do to create a nice, big, like harrowing score for a particular scene?
And one
kind of little spiel on how we sort of do it.
One interesting thing about Ruth's themes and how they grew through the show is, you know, I mean, she goes through so many kind of character shifts. I think. I mean, she's always very much Ruth, but you know, she's scheming in a lot of it, but then you know, as we get through season 3 and 4, she gets, you know, pretty rocked emotionally. I mean, with Wyatt and then and Wendy's brother, and those two themes. There's a theme that kind of comes in for Ruth's emotional state in regard to Wyatt and with the brother. And those two themes are very related to each other in the end. And the very end, one of the big moments, I guess we can give spoilers because you already said it, but when she dies, that's a marriage of those two themes, Ruth's emotional themes, along with the bigger kind of Ozark. Our main theme for Ozark is like 3 notes, so they're easy to place.
Now that plays into a general question by Thomas Kasi. Very general and technical. Do you start writing with a chord progression first or a melody 50-50, one more than the other?
Amazing.
God, I don't think I could say. I don't know.
Chords usually for me.
Chords.
Chords. I'll sit at the piano and I'll like get chords going and invert them and try different, try to find melodies within chord changes. As you change chord, is there a melody is there inside there somewhere that you can pick out? That sometimes happens. And then when you find a chord structure that you like, do you loop it and then play on top with the cello, or get an instrumentalist to play on top and then just get them to play? And then are you listening very keenly to whether a melody, even a snippet, 2 notes, 3 notes, sitting on top of that chord, that sounds nice. It's all about the ability to recognize, grab, take, move, grab, take, move, put together, and then listen. Does that sound like a melody? Like, does it make sense? Does it have an antecedent phrase and a consequential phrase? Does it need it? Is it a bunch of questions? What are you saying and why? You have to be able to describe the melody and interpret why it's working on the screen, married to picture. That's how we do it. That's how I do it.
Now, Jonathan Snell Callahan would like to know, how long does it take you to curate new instruments, sound effects, chains for a new project? And do you consider that to be part of writing a more like pre-production?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we do, I think it's kind of a process that goes on through the whole show, but it's definitely like, it's a big part of the beginning is, we have in our sessions folder, we always have a folder that's called elements that has all of these, sounds that we create specifically for that show. And they will, of course, like maybe you put a bunch in there when you're scoring the first episode and then you send stuff to the director and he doesn't like any of them. They'll stay in there anyways. And then they'll move to a bigger kind of library folder of ours. But we spend a lot of time, and we're very, it's a very important part of our process because we do love to have very specific textures, unique textures to every show or film. And when we kind of start though, we start those from a really like early spot. Like again, since Ozark kind of that was so successful to get early footage, we always ask for that with every project we work on, no matter what, film or TV show. Like, send us your dailies, send us your mood boards, all that stuff. Even if we're not starting to write music, we're thinking about it. So if we're working on another project and a sound or melody or whatever comes out and it doesn't work for that, we're already thinking about the next project. We can throw that in that folder.
Yeah, nothing's wasted ever.
Now, Outer Range, I believe, reaches its conclusion on Thursday or Friday. I have a feeling we're still not going to find out what the heck that void is.
No, we'll tell you.
Yeah, why don't we just tell you?
What is it like? I think of all the strange scores that you've done and all the strange shows, this might just take the cake. Tell me about working on the project.
Yeah, I mean, this was a dream project for us. It was like, I mean, we got approached pretty late in the game. I don't know, I'm not sure why it was later than most, but, and we actually demoed for it, which we don't usually do. We don't like to do it. And we will often say no. Earlier in our careers, we would do it, but now I don't know, we just don't like to do that. It's hard to actually demo and then give a good example of what you feel you're going to do for the show. But we got this show. We loved it so much that we were like, okay, we'll do the demo for sure. And the demos immediately, I think we hit the nail on the head with the sound. A lot of those demos are all in the show. One of them was the scene in the police station with Rhett and I can have so many shows I space on all the character names, but the kind of interview in the police station, where there's all this kind of weird percussion going on. But so that the sound of that came to us very quickly.
Weird percussion where you're going like this. Is that what you're doing?
Well, there's that and a bunch
It
of
came out loud and clear. My wife and I were watching. I was like, I think that's Saunder going like this. Sounds good.
So, yeah, that sound it came really fast and easily. I mean, it was really right up our alley. All the, like it was kind of a dream because we could do we had complete creative license. All the stuff they were using for temp was great, and they weren't attached to it, but it was a great roadmap for us. Yeah, I mean, it was just fun and
I mean, this goes back to kind of where we started playing music together, listening to like heavy metal, but also like classical music. What kind of sort of over the top romantic classical music might we listen to, or is it avant-garde or something? And what do we like? And in starting to write film scores, you're totally trying to like, I want that big luscious orchestra to like play our melodies, but you can't do that if the movie doesn't need it. And slowly through the years, we've gotten to touch upon like, like say Last Days in the Desert, we're dealing with religion and Jesus in the desert, and whoa, what could we do with melody there and orchestral expansion over the desert? Or a movie about, something else, but we've never really managed to get really crazy that often. So like Outer Range, as soon as we opened up the first two episodes that they showed us, like we were like, okay, this is an opportunity for us to finally like, okay, we could get a choir, we could try all kinds of, and it doesn't have to be traditional melodic Hollywood score. It could be so strange. And we could do Penderecki if we want. We can do, and get crazy. And I think we've slowly sort of been trying to move that way. Sci-fi, cosmic, nature, oceans, deserts, like, and beyond. So we were thrilled, obviously, and able to do it.
Now, you guys have had a really great track record of getting a lot of your scores released, which brings us to a question from the OST guy. How do you choose which tracks will go on a soundtrack release?
That's a good question.
Anything that sounds like a cue doesn't get on there. If it sounds like music or experimental, interesting orchestration or anything like that, that's on there. Anything that sounds like a cue, like, because every TV show has a filler cues. You need 45 seconds to change scene or something. That's not going to go on the soundtrack, is it? What's the point? Or doubtful. Or maybe you could put 4 of those together and make a piece, but usually there's enough content with the melodic sort of pillars and the different textures. So we just try to stick it all in and have it make sense, and then whittle it down to make it so that you can listen from beginning to end and get a nice sense of things.
It's a hard process, because especially with a TV show, because you just have so much stuff, and then you have themes that you've reused and built upon, and you're like, oh, which one do I use of that? With a film, it's quite easy because you got a smaller pool to grab stuff from. But I find it really frustrating and difficult.
It's hard, yeah. And then some of the cues are like, well, the first 30 seconds is just a tone, and then suddenly the orchestra is going to come in the second half. Yeah, but anybody who presses play on that track is going to be like, well, I'm forward a little bit. Next track. And you're like, oh, you're going to miss it. So do we put that one in, or
people might like it?
Yeah, right. I love the way we wait for 30 seconds.
Now, back into Ozark, a question from Andrew Carr. Ozark has such a stark and deep score. Do you find you had to pull back to the rhythmic sound, or was that the original goal?
Pull back to the rhythmic sound.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question completely. maybe it was the.
Well, look, I mean, our initial palette of percussion was like, it was like a trash can and like other metal things and plastic things that we had found, and we recorded them at different velocities. And it was one of the first times we made our own sound bank to be able to like draw from, because we were like, we're going to need to do it so fast for all these episodes, and we're just new to it, so we didn't know. Now we play everything, but like back then we were trying to make like a sound bank of sounds. And the idea though was to keep it pretty minimal, like a clang here and like I was saying before, and have like a weird dialogue between two clangy things, and have them talk to each other, and that's it. None of the big bass drums and taikos, like, we don't need all that for that. What can we do it to make it so weird?
Yeah, I think it was always the goal for it to be a very minimal score. It can be dark and deep without. I think it's darker and deeper when there's less going on. Really, I mean, you can really create a vibe with just a pulse or a single percussive instrument, or the combination of the two.
Now, Dan would like to know, can you share with us any tips you both use to process organic sounds, woodwinds, trumpets, percussion in Ozark, for instance?
Yeah, we use all sorts of weird things. I know it's always changing. We have some outboard gear, compressors, distortion, lots of distortion. We like the Sound Toys Devil Lock plugin a lot. We run almost. I mean, that was one thing also in Outer Range that was a big part of the score. Was we'd run a bunch of string sessions we had recorded for another project into like a modular synthesizer rack thing. And then we're able to kind of granulize it and manipulate the speed in real time and create these strange loops that sounded organic, but they're pretty thoroughly processed. But that's, like for us, it's like we treat that part of the process just like playing an instrument and an improvising instrument. We just let it run, let the record run, and run it through whatever tape machines. We have old tape machines we always use, a weird speaker. God, I don't know. I mean, there's so many I couldn't like specifically pinpoint one that we use.
So, I mean, you've got one thing popping up after the other. So basically, as soon as the void of open Outer Range is going to end, you've got one opening up for Sissy Spacek to another planet with Night Sky. Tell us about what we can expect from that score and series.
Another one where we were like, oh, wow, it's going to be cosmic, moving from one planet to another and all this kind of stuff. But it ends up being much more about interfamily and generational relationships. And so it's actually quite an emotional score through all the episodes. And then with these moments of pretty big cosmic, sort of otherworldly, melodic space orchestra. But yeah, so aside from that, though, it's a lot of piano and strings, and then there are some electronic elements too to the score. But yeah, it's a very heartfelt series, very family, interpersonal relationships, as opposed to like stars and planets and stuff.
I mean, you guys work in so many weird shows. Do you ever like work on shows where you just don't understand what is going on, and do you think that makes the movie better, the music better?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, we always create our interpretation of what's going on, regardless of what the actual story is. I mean, Enemy was a great one. Enemy, there's like there's like YouTube videos that try to explain what the movie's about, and we had a blast doing that film, and we created our own story to it and have our own theories about it. I don't remember what they are, but and Outer Range is a pretty weird one that we kind of we get to interpret parts of ourselves, and I think that's kind of the beauty of being a composer and working on these things. Even with things that have a firm storyline, you can still like really like project your, sometimes we will come up with a cue that does something completely different than what the director or showrunner ever intended there. And the most exciting thing, I think, is when that lands and the director says to you, wow, I've never watched my film in this way, like, or this scene in this way. I never realized that could be drawn out of this performance. And that's a really, so we try to, keep ourselves open to doing that all the time, and in terms of like when there's temp music or something, we try and, at least our first round of music for them, we really just try to disregard, a lot of stuff about that and really just feel it straight from where we are at with it.
And on Friday, you've got the true crime fictionalization of The Staircase, which started off as a Netflix documentary. Tell us about that show, and does it make any difference when you're scoring essentially a true story?
Does the true story matter? I don't know. Probably. I'm not sure how musically it affects, but it affects us the way we sort of look at the whole thing. Staircase is a great example of where a director comes in, and we've worked with him many times. What have we done? 3 films with him already. And so this will be our first TV show with him, with Antonio Campos. And we can sit in the meeting and be like, this is what we think it should be. But then clearly the director is going to have his or her, like, and he wasn't like, this is kind of what I'm looking for. He had some temp stuff in there. But what's great about, he just was like, he's like, I love classical music. He's like, I think classical music for this. And we're like, okay. And he's like, harpsichord. And we're like, what? Harpsichord. Like, I love the harpsichord. Like, I don't know, guys. I just love it. And we have this wonderful relationship with him where it's all really funny and a lot of jokes. But we thought it was joking, but it's serious. And then we're like, okay, great. Like, and what does that mean to the score? Like, what are we going to do? Should we buy a harpsichord and start doing our usual experiments? And we're like, well, maybe it'll just end up. And as always with us, we ended up using the harpsichord, and you'll hear it in the score, but it's not everywhere. It's just here and there, just a color. But it started out as like, oh God, the whole thing's going to be classical harpsichord and from Baroque music. And we were like, holy crap. But it didn't end up like that at all. But it's just good. I just wanted to share that with you, to just give you an idea, like, where do we all start from? Nobody really knows. And you just have to start somewhere, and you just start going. It ended up, I was just listening to most of it last night, and I was really, really enjoying it. It's just such a strange ensemble that we ended up using of electronic sounds, but also a small string ensemble and the harpsichord and a lot of close mic'd piano. And yes, this is a true crime series, but it's totally about family and relationships again. So a lot of opportunity with classical music to really like draw on some beautiful chords and timeless chords and melodies, where that could have existed 400 years ago, or it can exist now in sort of a modern way. So we're sort of doing that, and it's very emotional, propulsive at points, but it's definitely got like its own sound, and I'm really excited about it, actually. I remember starting out, took a while for us to find it, but by the end we really, I think, nailed it. It's going to be a great score.
Now, if I have probably a personal favorite, and mea culpa, I temp with your music as well, it's The Current War. And to me, it's probably one of the truly great movies about being a captain of industry and music that really creates the feeling of electricity. Tell me about working on that.
Well, that was a pretty crazy experience. That was that was a film that had been almost, I think it'd been completed, and it was, I think it was a Harvey Weinstein thing, and then it got pulled,
Shelved.
and then they decided the director wanted to re-edit and rescore, and he had 3 weeks. We had 3 weeks to score the whole film, and barely, not much money, and just like, do what you do, guys. And he was someone we hadn't worked with before, but man, we just, it was one of those things. We just went in and it really clicked for us.
I feel like right around that time, though, Saunder, you had bought some keyboard or something, and you were getting really good with like electronic propulsion.
OB6.
Yeah. And it was really great because he'd be like, oh, check it out. I found this really cool or something. And then I'd be like, oh my God, let me try putting some cello on top of that to like offset all this electronic arpeggiation, and which we had just done for like a chef's table episode about a Spanish chef. And we did all this electronic sort of repetitious stuff. And then it was just made sense. And we were like, oh, now we're getting good at that. So, and it was just about marrying strings with electronica, like, and trying to make it orchestral and beautiful as quickly as possible. We had no time.
It's a good example also of how new instruments can be inspirations for scores. I mean, we do this all the time. We for
new film, new instrument.
Yeah, we buy a new instrument and try to learn it, and it just becomes a new tool in our toolbox.
Yeah.
Now, Jam, I'm so sorry. Now, Jam Productions thought that Hellstrom was clearly one of the darkest scores you worked on. Did it take long to come up with the sound for it?
Hellstrom, yes. No, I don't think it wasn't such a long process to come up with the sound. We kind of dove right in there. Again, it's those. The darker shows are really kind of come very natural to us. I mean, a lot of the different genres we do feel natural to us, but this was it wasn't too painful to come up with.
Jason Bateman and Laura Linney have directed terrific episodes of Ozark, and a lot of actors have actually directed episodes of the series. And Dale would like to know, what were some of the examples of how Jason Bateman might describe the musical approach he needs for various scoring situations using actor terminology, story terminology, musical terminology?
He is he's to the point and short sentences, but always the right adjectives. And I wouldn't say they're necessarily musical; they're just artistic, artistic metaphors, and yeah. And I think that's what we love to receive more than anything. You don't want too many instructions, but his are you'll be, I don't know, make it as dark as night, guys, but then when she turns, as bright as day, or something like that, and we'd be like, okay, don't say anything else. Like, that's perfect. Stuff like that. He's just the right kinds of metaphors that we understand. I don't know how to explain it better than that. I don't have many examples. Do you, Saunder? I could look through.
There wasn't a lot of that. I mean, he was, like, he knew, like, I don't know. We had a thing going that he was trusted us with so much with everything. There were very little notes and very little directions. We just kind of got it.
Oh, it's almost hard for me to believe that Ozark is over. It doesn't really feel like the end of the show, as opposed to a pretty good season, and it leaves a lot open to keep going back to. I mean, do you think it's the end, really? Or how do you see this continuing?
Well, we don't have any say in it, do we?
Unless we start our own spin-off.
Yeah.
Just the music.
I
always thought they were going to end up ending it and then doing a Ruth spin-off, but obviously that's not happening. I don't know. That's an impossible question for us to answer. I would be excited if they did something else in the world of Ozark. But I think that also Jason and Chris Mundy know that it was such a great show, and I think they know it needs to end for it to really be something in posterity as a, stay the great show it is. I think that they don't want to keep rehashing it.
Now, jumping back to Tokyo Vice, first episode was directed by Michael Mann, the yakuza of directors for a lot of composers. What was your trick for surviving, or how involved was he with you guys?
We didn't actually know, Saunder and I, we knew his films. We didn't know much about him as a person. So when we first walked into his office for the first, to listen to our first cues, it was like a movie scene. We were just like, hello, sir. But again, he reminded us in a certain way of some of our other directors that we've worked with, in that he's an auteur. I mean, you just the way he talks about things and explains things is different. It doesn't have all that sort of, like I'm doing, wishy-washy kind of, but he's just the right sentence at the right time to describe what's needed, and we're moving on. Like, where are you guys from? Yeah, cool, awesome. All right, let's get to work. And it was like, but we left there being like, wow, what a strange meeting that was, but like inspired to work with him, and then kind of inspired and surprised at how eloquent, and he would say things like, check out the lighting when he's walking through, look at the lighting on his face. And we're like, wow, yeah, like I was like more about his motivation and stuff, but like, yeah, look at the light. He's like, you know how long we spent on that light? And all the papers in the background, and he would say things that were like, wow, like, and just make us see what went into the shot and what his whole idea is. There's a whole thinking to it. Yeah. And we were just like kind of in awe, I would say.
He's a real craftsman, I think. Yeah. He's so deeply into the process, and for a single television episode, he split it into 4 reels like a film. He treated it like a full film, that one episode. And it was really interesting to watch how deeply he went into every single scene. You see, we have directors that work like that. We have directors that work totally different than that. It's really interesting to see it, but it's to see someone that's, such a legend and watch him do his thing was pretty inspiring. It was pretty cool. It was a difficult process, but it was definitely great.
Now, I'll wrap up our audience questions with one from Thomas Cassi. It's a good one. What are the best tips or tricks for composing fast? Please share your secrets.
What a question. Just let it out. I love it.
I find that it's really important to like cut yourself off at a certain point with a composition. And I tend to do this thing where let's say I write a piano piece and then I add something or whatever. I'll listen to it over and over again and keep tweaking the mix of it a little bit, or tweaking the compression on the piano or something to try to make some. But lately, I mean, in the past few years, I've really noticed that it's so much better if I get the idea down, like the general idea down, and then just close it and move on and mark it for Danny to look at and move on. Because and then it becomes more of a collaboration with us anyways, and it just like keeps me, it actually keeps me moving through the project so that I'm more engaged in themes and recurring themes, and I don't forget as quickly or get wrapped up in one little thing. So I think it's really like, just having it. Somebody once, I don't know who it was, who said, like, don't stop working when you're done with everything. Stop working and have a lot of things to do the next day or something. Like when I forget what the. Yeah, I think it was.
That's really great. Thing. Yeah, the fastest way for me, is to record something in, say, the afternoon, finish it off after dinner, and like have it feel like it's in a good place, and then check it out the next morning. And then if I still think it's good the next morning, then it's sendable. So that's about 12 hours just or so. Unless it's less time that's needed than that, like, oh, we need to rewrite this and send it right away. Well, what are we going to do? Now, I think we haven't quite answered this question. Are there techniques and things that, like favorite chords that I know, a chord progression that I, do I go to A minor because I like it? Yeah. Like there are certain things and certain rhythms that I might go to be like, well, look, I don't have much time to experiment, so I'm just going to squeeze these things and hope they work for this scene. Or certain cello things that I like to do, like, fill in on the offbeats, probably going to work. Let's give it a shot. Don't like this piece of music much. When is this something good going to happen to this piece of music? Keep trying. And then if it doesn't, you got to recognize, like Saunder said, close the session, go do something else. Because the idea of composing and having an idea come to you, and then how you're going to play it and then record it has to happen very, very quickly. And you have to be in the right sort of mood, and you might not be in the right frame of mind. So you got to close and come back later.
Another thing,
trust yourself to do
another thing that's super important is to have everything set up so that you can record things fast. I mean, for us, it's mics on the piano that are always plugged in, always on, all the synths and all these things are all set up. Percussion is set up. We have we each have one mic that we use for everything at our desk.
Yep. Same mic.
And grab whatever instrument we want. We don't use a lot of MIDI stuff. We do it mostly live. So we just need to make sure that everything is accessible.
Yeah. If something's in its case, I probably won't get it. Even the double bass back there, I'm like, you're all the way over there. Maybe I could just play it on the cello and put some R bass on it.
So I guess my final question for you is, do you think, that you represent just how far you can go out now with TV and film music? Do you think you're in an age now where you can have convention, but stuff that just totally throws musical convention into the twilight zone and just basically do one score after the other like that?
I hope so. I don't know. I mean, we do this because it feels natural to us, and we're, to us, it feels good, and it's our natural inclination to try something different every time we get a new project. It doesn't feel right for us to try to rehash things. So I hope that's coming across and people are inspired by it. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Danny and Saunder, I just want to thank you both so much for joining us at Film Music Live. I want you all to watch the finale of Ozark on Netflix if you haven't binged it already. Outer Range, which ends up on Thursday on Amazon Prime, and Tokyo Vice, which has also reached its crescendo on HBO Max. And their soundtracks are available on Verve Records, Sony Music, and Lakeshore Records. And I want to give a big thanks to Mark Northam, our producer Dale Turner, Mark Banning, Kurt Nishimura, Kathy Ng, and Lakeshore Records. I'll see you all on the next Film Music Live.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, everybody.